morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Tuesday, terrible Tuesday, September 30th, the year of our Lord 2025. Last day of September, rolling into Cocktober, as my friend Josh Pate likes to call it. Big stretch of games coming up for the Gamecocks after the bye week. Obviously, we're going to get into that and talk a little about just overall the team, where they're going, what needs to happen for them to get to where they want to go. Certainly not there yet, but lots of broad discussion this week on coffee. Reminder, no coffee on Friday. Phil and I are going to take the day off. No show, no coffee. I got some things I got to get taken care of, but we'll be with you for the rest of the week. Preston Thorne, Mike Morgan on Inside the Gamecocks, the morning show this morning. And then it's Terrible Tuesday with Phil and myself, the Mad Dog. After that, we're going to have a JC and Morgan. Mike had a conflict that came up at the last minute. So no JC and Morgan this morning. We'll be back next Tuesday with that on the Chief Sports Network. The poll of the day will be up on thebigspur.com. You can certainly go and vote on that. It's a free content item, even if you're not a member. So go over there and check that out. I think today's topic will be on the center position, which is always good for discussion. Also, want to encourage you about a new feature here on ITG or on Chief Sports Network. It'll probably be played on the show with Phil and myself. Gamecock Graffiti. So you can call in 803-250-1297. I don't know if you listen to the Mark Packer show, Prime Time with the Pac-Man back in the day out of Charlotte. They simulcast it all over the Carolinas. They used to have the whiner line. Well, we don't want to whine, you know. Oh, I think we do. Me and Phil do too much of that ourselves. But you can call in 803-250-1297. And the first name, hometown, where you're calling from. You know, in other words, like Jimmy from Hampton, you know, or Billy from Chesney or something like that. Or, you know, Chef Will Turner from Scottsdale, Arizona, man. So, by the way, congrats to him. Very nice piece in a local magazine from Chef Will. He joins us every Friday for delicious tailgating recipes. His beef kebab recipe is up on the YouTube channel right now, so go check that out if you're looking for an exciting tailgating idea. But first name, hometown, keep it short, 90 seconds or so. We had our first one last week. Corey from Orangeburg chimed in, had some really good stuff. It can be funny. You know, they're not all going to make it if you call in and blast and cuss and stuff. We're probably not going to play it, but we want to get more voices involved with our show. And that's a great way to do it. We want to hear from all of you. You know, we got the Nana Sports chat box for Club Chief members. You can join Club Chief right here on the YouTube channel for $4.99 a month. And then Wide Open Wednesday, everybody gets in. But beyond the chat box, you know, we want to hear from the people. And that's all the great Gamecock fans from around the great state of South Carolina and points beyond. So thank you all for making this a well listened to group of shows that covers one team. There's nothing else like it in the country. All this for one college team. So we're very proud of that, and certainly happy about the way this part of it's gone. I wish I could say the same thing about the first 5 games of the season, but you know, it is what it is. It's going to be interesting the next couple of weeks. Alabama plays Vandy and Missouri back to back, I think. And so we'll see how Vanderbilt and Missouri match up against the Crimson Tide before the Tide comes to Columbia on homecoming, the last weekend of October. So we're the last week of September now, last day of September now, so about a month from now. So that I think that'll give us a good, I don't know, kind of a good feel. Alabama went into Georgia and won, and we're going to talk about the next 4 opponents here today on Coffee. Big win for them. Georgia's defense is very young this year. They've consistently lost a lot of players, but you know, this year I'm not sure that group is what we've been accustomed to seeing. Kirby Smart said something about it after the game. I mean, they shut Alabama out in the second half. It's kind of like last season, a tale of two halves, but couldn't get enough offense against the Tide defense. And and they lost again to Alabama at home 24-21 Saturday night. So, you know, um, we'll see, how some of these teams turn out. But it starts with LSU. And we'll get more into LSU next week. Obviously, the Bayou Bengals had a lot of them had them as pre. Once they beat Clemson, they were kind of considered the front runner, and they beat Clemson. Clemson's not turned right now. I have a sneaky suspicion, and you guys know you'll agree with me here. Yeah, North Carolina coming up, Boston College, SMU comes to Memorial Stadium. I still feel like they're going to get on a run, get on a roll. I think they can beat Florida State at home later this year, and they'll be probably rolling by the time they come to Columbia. That's just kind of how things work out, right? I think rumors of their demise have been greatly exaggerated. Although Dabo Swinney, if you look at the odds of the next coach fired, he's kind of creeping up there. I don't think that there's any way they're going to fire the best coach they've ever had. That would be Although they did it once with Danny Ford, but that was kind of for off the field stuff. And then another thing I'll add here about teams being written off, and really this applies to the Gamecocks too. In college football, you don't have to stay in the same place. You don't have to be the same team with the same issues every week. We see it around the country. Indiana is an example of that. Actually, Illinois is an example of that. You go into Indiana and get boat raced. I mean, 63-10. That was embarrassing for the Illini. They have a big game the next weekend in Champaign against Southern Cal, and lo and behold, they won. Survived some controversial calls and won the football game against a Southern Cal team that I think really just struggles against line of scrimmage teams. But they didn't let that get to them. They lost. So what? Now what? That's that's a Muschampism. But they rallied and rebounded. That applies to Clemson. It applies to South Carolina. It applies to LSU. You don't stay the same. And so I think if you're looking for hope for the Gamecocks, there's that. Now, don't get me wrong, there are issues that need to be addressed on this football team, but like yesterday's episode was called or titled Signs of Life. There were some signs of life the other night for the Gamecocks, particularly on defense, which is going to be very, very important moving forward into this game against LSU in a couple of weeks. LSU's kind of a struggling bunch on offense right now. They're kind of a mirror image, polar opposite. I guess not mirror image, polar opposite of last year. Because last year their defense was not good, and that's why I was kind of confident Carolina could win that game because it was early. I was like, they got a really good new coordinator, but they're scrambling looking for defensive linemen. They still had Harold Perkins up at linebacker, I think. Um, I thought their defense played pretty well once Robbie Asher came in last year's game. But they went out in the transfer portal and added some dudes, especially up front. And they've got players. Perkins is playing on the D line again. They got playmakers. And the secondary is really, really good. They picked off DJ Lagway 5 times. It is as elite of a defense as you'll see. Now, on the road at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, Charlie Weiss Jr., Trinidad Chambliss kind of got some things going against them in a 24-19 win against LSU last week, first loss of the season. Yeah, so they're not this impenetrable force, but I don't think anybody would argue that Ole Miss's offense isn't anything but really good again this year, and Carolina hadn't been. So, there's obviously some differences there, and like I said, you don't get the same team week to week. But so far through 5 games, LSU's not had the offensive output with Garrett Nussmeier that we maybe think. There's some talk maybe he's nursing an injury. Their backup, Van Buren, was at Mississippi State last year and did some good things as their starter. And he is waiting in the wings. I haven't heard anything about Nussmeier not playing. But they lost a lot of offensive linemen. They're susceptible to some things Carolina does as far as rushing the passer. Their running back situation, they really need Caden Durham, who as a freshman last year rushed for almost 100 yards against the Gamecocks. They really need to get him back. He had a good workmanlike effort against Clemson, rushed for almost 100 against Florida, and then went out Southeast Louisiana game. So they need to get him back. I think to get the run game going against the Carolina defense, he's really good. And there's a drop off after that happens. But outside of the Southeast Louisiana game, with Southeast Louisiana, if you know anything else, is not stellar. uh, yeah, outside of that game, they've 17 points, 23 points against Louisiana Tech, 20 against Florida, and then the 19 up in Oxford in the loss. So they're not really scoring a whole lot. Now, again, I'll keep repeating myself here. Teams change, and Carolina's defense, I think, needs to just continue to lock in like they did against Kentucky, and they're going to have a whale of a game uh, against the Tigers for any chance of winning because I think points are going to be hard to come by in Baton Rouge, where South Carolina has not won since 1994, which was the only win Carolina's had over LSU. It's been a big struggle against these guys historically in the SEC. So LSU usually wins the game. That's unfortunate. It's kind of the one opponent that Carolina's never sort of figured out. They've only beaten. I think they have less wins against LSU than any other opponent in the SEC besides Texas. And they're 1-0 against Texas. They beat them in the 50s out in Austin, and they'll see the Longhorns at Williams-Brice Stadium in 2027. But you know, it's not a good record, and they've lost all kinds of ways down in Baton Rouge, close blowouts, usually blowouts. It just hasn't been. There's not a track record for success. The game is at night, 7:30, or 7:45. It'll be at night on some network, as the official Gamecock football account said yesterday. So it's a huge challenge, but it's not one of those where, after LSU beat Clemson in the opener, you thought maybe they'd get on a roll and be undefeated and ranked in the top five. Well, they're not so far. They're struggling a little bit on offense. And so that gives you hope. They say you take your defense on the road, and Carolina's defense certainly played like what we're accustomed to seeing against Kentucky the other night. And, question marks up front for LSU. It should be, in theory, a game where Carolina's defense has an opportunity to go down there and compete at a high level. Um, I think a lot depends on Nussmeier, how he's feeling, if he's in the zone, and again the running back situation. And I don't, they got some receivers from the portal. I think they have good receivers, but it's not the group from last year, which was really really good. One guy to look out for, I believe Adam Anderson is his name for LSU. Aaron Anderson, I'm sorry, he's their best player receiving wise. Xavier Thomas is obviously really good. Nick Anderson hadn't done much from Oklahoma. Barry Brown, who we remember from Kentucky, actually leads them in catches with 25. But it's a good receiving core, and with Anderson, it's very good. But we'll see. They like to give the ball to Xavier Thomas in space as well. So, and he's even thrown a pass this year. So, Xavier Thomas, ladies and gentlemen, circle that guy. But LSU's got. Nussmeier's been sacked 7 times this year, 7 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 67.3 completion percentage for an average of 6.8 yards or yards per pass completion. That's not a lot. Their scheme of things is a little bit, they lost Mike Denbrock. He went back to Notre Dame, and, this is Joe Sloan, who was with Skip Holtz at Louisiana Tech, is their OC, their DC, obviously Blake Baker, who was at Missouri, and he's an LSU grad. He's excellent. But offensively, it's interesting. Now, Brian Kelly, to his credit, doesn't, he doesn't stay down long. Yeah, he'll drop a game in a heartbeat, but they usually rebound. If you remember last year, the big win in Columbia they had, that would have been their second loss. And so I think they're fully aware that this is a huge game for them. They got Vanderbilt on the road, A&M at home, and at Alabama after they play the Gamecocks. So it doesn't get any easier for LSU either after they play Carolina. But matchup wise, Carolina, as far as the defense versus their offense goes, I think that's the key. The defense has to continue to tackle well. Can't have another night like you had at Missouri, you can get blown out. Um, but if you play like you did against Kentucky, there's a chance. I'm not saying they'll win. I'm just saying there is a chance. So you're saying there's a chance. Oklahoma comes to town for the rare early kickoff this year. Gamecocks seem to play a lot of early games last season, a lot of night games this season. That's kind of how the SEC does it, where they slot everything in windows, and then the profile of the program got raised a little bit. So not a lot of early games. Oklahoma plays Kent State this weekend. Michael Hawkins Jr. takes over for John Mateer, who has an injury on his throwing hand. He had to have surgery. So you don't know how that's going to work out. What's interesting about Carolina and Oklahoma is it's Oklahoma's first true road game outside of a football game against Temple at Lincoln Financial Field. So that was an easy win for them at Temple. So the Gamecocks fan base will be loud and proud, obviously. We don't know what Mateer will look like at that point in time. There's some optimism they'll be back. He'll be back. He's been very good. He's their leading rusher, leading ground getter. I don't know. The Oklahoma's had some big wins, but their defense is just that's the second straight. I mean, LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama. I mean, there's no rest for the weary. Offensive, you're an offense playing those three teams back to back. It's unbelievable. You're kind of glad you have Lenore Sellers right in that situation. So it's going to be tough to block them, and I'm sure they'll dial up a lot of pressure and have a great game plan. But if they don't have Mateer, they could revert back to being a kind of a struggling bunch. And again, another key for the is this defense has to continue to play like it played against Kentucky. Kentucky's not an offensive juggernaut, right? But Carolina, after the first drive, bowed up, stopped the run, ended any discussion of this team cannot stop the run, uh, and swarmed to the football and played physical. And when they do that, I think some good things can happen. Obviously four turnovers was very helpful as well. So in that game, coming up with Oklahoma, Carolina's defense again is going to have to lock in, and they have to lock in against Alabama too. Alabama's got Vandy and Missouri coming up, like I mentioned. They have some really good players, obviously talented. I think they're hitting their stride. Kalen DeBoer. Uh, had he lost to Georgia, people are going to get ill, but I'm telling you, you better not lose to Vanderbilt this weekend or at Missouri either. Which I don't know that they will. I think Missouri's probably got a good shot at getting them in Como. It'll be a big game for them at Missouri. It's actually an 11 a.m. noon kickoff out in Como here in a couple of weeks. Same day Carolina plays LSU, but certainly Alabama better be careful. That bunch goes. They're not under DeBoer. They haven't been great at stopping dual threat quarterbacks. Although, I don't know how they did. I mean, Gunnar Stockton last week probably wasn't. I'll have to check the stats on that real quick. But I guess they did a good job there. But the thing with Alabama that I noticed, number one, Ty Simpson on offense is getting a lot better. Really good game against the Georgia Bulldogs. No turnovers in the game. Rushing the ball. Yeah, Stockton rushed it about 5 times, 22 yards. Not bad. 21-yard gain. And all that. I don't know what was going on with Georgia's offense in the first, in the second half. They had a freshman running back run for 119 yards. So, who knows? Who knows? That was a big win for Alabama. But like I said, they got Vandy and Missouri, so there's some common opponent looks you can get before they come in for a very big college football game. They'll be real battle tested by then, having gone to FSU and Georgia and Missouri before they come to Williams-Brice. And then Ole Miss was number one in the SEC 24/7 Sports Publishers poll this week. I ranked them number two. I'm not trying to overblow a win over an LSU team with a struggling offense, but Ole Miss has answered the call. I think Chambliss is really good. They've continued to get players there under Lane Kiffin. And I watched the Lane Kiffin documentary on ESPN last night. Very good. Very good stuff. Really takes you inside his life and it makes you feel good. But, Ole Miss, that's after Alabama. Out in Oxford, Carolina has never defeated a Lane Kiffin team. They lost 27-3 last year. I don't know, about, they got an off week. Then Washington State is horrible. But then before they play Carolina, they go at Georgia and at Oklahoma. So that's by then, Mateer will probably be back. So no rest for the weary in the SEC, but Washington State's god awful. So they should, and that replaced Wake Forest, who played some chicken and backed out of that game against the Rebels. So they should be 6-0 going into Athens in a couple of 3 weeks. And so Carolina's due for a win over Lane Kiffin and the Rebels. They're due for a win against LSU. Frankly, they're due for a win against Alabama. Obviously beat Oklahoma last year. So we'll see what happens. One thing I did want to point out, and this is not a Pollyanna sunshine pumping, hey guys, here's what can happen. But I want to point this out. Carolina on the offensive line, and we're going to get to that as another burning questions bi-week rambling kind of thing here. Carolina went to Oklahoma last year as at 3-3, kind of a struggling bunch, right? I'm using that. That's a Spurrierism, struggling bunch. But 3 losses, 1-3 in the league. They get 2 defensive touchdowns and then a turnover that puts them in good position, and they win 35-9. Kentucky, the game the other night, must win. It was must win last year in Norman. Team rallied, defense tackled and played its butt off. 2 defensive touchdowns, 135-13. I don't know. Was last year's Oklahoma team as good as this year's Kentucky team? There are a lot of issues on both teams, but and that one obviously was out there. So obviously it's a more impressive win when you walk into one of the toughest environments or the most traditionally successful environments in college football. I don't want to overhype their crowd in that one versus a night home game where you usually win against a team you've beaten 4 years in a row. But I point out that they had the defensive touchdowns. They scored 35 points the second half. After building a big halftime lead, people were griping about the offense. They came back the next week at home at night against A&M and had one of the most impressive wins of the year against a previously undefeated team. Now, again, that was home at night, and they got to go to Baton Rouge. But they had an open date between those 2 weeks. Yeah, sometimes history repeats itself, and so there's a chance Carolina can get it together and play well at LSU. They're certainly going to need it. The big thing about that A&M game last year was the offensive line played its best game of the year. Now, they weren't perfect. Lenore Sellers had to escape pressure and all that good stuff, but there were a lot of NFL players on that A&M D line. Carolina was able to line up and run it with Rocket Sanders and had some good things going and tweaked some things too that week after the struggles in the second half at Oklahoma. So those things, if you look at track record, I mean that applies. And the one thing I say, like I said yesterday, the offensive line, I wouldn't say they played well against Kentucky. There's some things to build on the fourth quarter, obviously, but I thought they played with a greater sense of urgency, a lot more toughness and enthusiasm. And that was obvious. And so what happened there? I don't know. Latte Lance from the Nana Sports chat box said yesterday he was watching warm-ups before the Kentucky game and said Sean Elliott was over there with the offensive line. I haven't heard that he's like coaching them or anything, but we've seen Sean Elliott's pregame before at all stops. And so if that got him going, I would obviously continue to have Coach Elliott get them fired up before the game because they were all jacked up. I mean, I have not seen that type of fire from the offensive line, and I'll continue to say this. I mean, you have to sustain it, but if they do that, if they go out there with that mindset, the system has to help them. The coaches have to help them. Lenore Sellers has to help them. Obviously, the other blocking figures on the team, blocking people, I guess, has to help with the blocking. But good things tend to happen in football when you play like that. And I don't think athletic ability or talent is in question with a lot of these guys. I think there's a lot of dudes on the offensive line, and it has been that way. Speaking of dudes, I think there's a question. With Nolan Hay and Casey Henry, Beamer says they're optimistic. Will they go back in the lineup? Well, I think at center, that's a big question. We haven't seen Nolan Hay, but for a little bit, he started the Missouri game, thought he held up pretty well. Um, but Rodney Newsome last week, one of those guys that played with a lot of fire. And I think, after he came in for Hay, who got injured, I thought he played good football, good, clean football. Did he miss blocks? Yes. Was it perfect? No, but it was better. And I think this is no offense to Boaz Stanley at all. I think he just kind of got swamped and overwhelmed with some of the communication and mental aspects of it. I mean, he's a big, tough kid that can play football, obviously, but if you're having communication issues and they're doing facilitating some of the things that happened up front through the first four games, like people going this way and that way, not knowing what to do. And then all of a sudden you put somebody else in at center and it's a little better. I mean, there you go. There's your sign. So we'll see if he makes a return or not. But I would assume it would be a guard if he did. I just think that the Boaz Stanley thing at center just did not work for the Gamecocks. But I've been surprised before by some of these lineups. So what do I think? What do y'all think? What do we think? You can drop comments. I don't always read the comments. There's some really dumb comments that make it to these videos sometimes by people who I don't even think are Gamecock fans. But it makes for a good discussion with your fellow Gamecocks as far as what you think the best offensive line lineup is. And I'll tell you the one I like. I think left tackle Tree, Babalade, left guard Surratt, who had his best game, true freshman from Gaffney, really had a nice pull and block on the Rasul Faison touchdown. I think the second one the other night. Newsome or Hay, that's the big question for me, and that's today's poll. I mean, because I don't have enough to go on Hay, but I do on Newsome the last couple of weeks. So I don't know. Y'all tell me. I could go either way with that. Whoever the best communicator is. Right guard Trevon Ball, I think. Um, I read, gosh, I was on the Big Spur yesterday. People were getting on him about missing a block, and I was like, gosh, did he just let somebody go right by him? Nah, it was a Lenore Sellers run, and he kind of just missed the guy. He was downfield. Yeah, he'll make that block again. I don't want to beat him up too bad on that, but Trevon Ball, I mean, He was somebody poured some aggression in his head. He's the leader of the O line. I think consistently he's played well. And then right tackle, I'd go if Henry's not 100%, not 90, 100. I'd go with Jatavius Shivers. I mean, I think it gives you a big offensive line with athleticism, um, and a unit that I thought, what on the field Saturday night looked probably about as good as it's been. Just being honest. So the offensive line lineup's going to be important. I was watching Coach Dan Casey is on Instagram. He goes back and pulls plays. If you're into X's and O's and stuff, it's a great follow. And he showed Oregon's offensive line during the whiteout against Penn State, and he was talking about silent snap counts and communication. These guys look like mimes up there on the front, like signaling numbers and stuff. I hope Carolina can do that. That's a with this bunch, it's kind of, you kind of wonder, but you're not gonna be able to hear in Baton Rouge, um, probably at all. I've been there many times. It's a very, very loud stadium. Probably the loudest in the SEC, especially at night. So silent communication, silent snap count. I mean, you can feel me, folks. You can see the disaster coming if that stuff's not hitting. And I'm pretty sure they're going to work on that all week. So you got to make sure that basic thing that starts every play is sound, and then go from there. 'Cause this is a ferocious defensive line. I mean, they're going to have to go play against. So whoever can do the silent snap count the best, probably be my pick for center on that. As I said, the defensive line needs to continue to eat, and they need to continue to tackle well. I think against LSU's pass game, getting hopefully Judge Collier, he played 18 snaps according to the unofficial count the other night. If he can get back out there and be full go, that's going to help them with physicality. Looking at it, they do like to go wide and run that wide thing. They did it last year with some success against the Gamecocks, and all that. And then finally, the bye week bullet point here, if you will. The offense, the scheme, I still don't know what they're, it, everybody talks about identity, and I get it. I think it's kind of an overrated term because what you want to do is to be able to do everything. Those are good offenses. But, I don't know, it seems like, from afar that they want to be able to line up and pound the rock with with Lenore Sellers at quarterback. Well, I don't think that's going to work. And even if the O line was pretty good, that doesn't work in the SEC. That said, I don't think the final drive Saturday night was like, oh, here's the dream and the vision of what the offense needs to be. I think that's a very specific thing you work on, like goal line offense, whatever. I kind of laugh whenever I hear 4 minute offense because I think about 8 minute abs. There's 9 minute abs, 9 minute and 50 minute, 9 minute offense the other night. But, it's demoralizing to an opponent when you just do that and drag them down the field and churn out first downs and work clock at the end. Would I have liked to have seen them score again? Absolutely. Especially if they'd have thrown it through the air or something. And I'll remind everybody, last year, the SEC tiebreaker, because I ran the numbers, like what if Carolina had not gotten robbed in that game against LSU and won it? They would have had a 6-2 conference record, and they would have been in the mix to go to Atlanta. Would they have gotten the tiebreaker? And it's absolutely they would. And it's because it got down to scoring differential margin, and Carolina had a 25-point win over Kentucky, a 26-point win over Oklahoma, a 24-point win over Texas A&M, and a 21-point win against Vanderbilt. And that put them over. They would have gone ahead of Georgia. Georgia had some closer games, including like a 10-point win against Mississippi State, where Mississippi State came back, and an 18-point loss to Ole Miss. So that would have, kind of evened it out. And then Carolina had a 3-point loss and a 2-point loss. So this year, you're minus 33, you're minus 11 right now. So that probably matters. People may get mad about running up the score, but you're in a 16 team one division league, and it's probably going to go to tiebreakers. So I would have loved to have seen him score again, but what's best for this team moving forward was probably what happened because it's about confidence. And, they're still going to hear how bad the offensive line is. You can't keep players off social media. And as much as I dislike some of the hot takery out there, um, fans want to fire their coach. I mean, you have to understand that the criticisms are plausible and the coaches make good money, more than we all make. And they get paid to handle it. It's part of it. But sometimes that affects the players. It's just like, oh gosh, these guys are really on the coach and they love their coach and all that. I'm not saying don't get on social media and criticize Lonnie Teasley or the O line because this is the United States of America. But sometimes that has unintended consequences when it comes to motivation, guys trying too hard, worried about making mistakes, that kind of thing. I thought the offensive line played more free the other night. They made mistakes. Don't get me wrong, and it wasn't a beautiful game up front, but I think lining up, running out 9 minutes, if you're an offensive lineman, uh, tight end, running back, Lenoris, whoever, that's going to give you some confidence. Hey, we can do this, and what does it mean in the grand scheme of things against a Kentucky team that I think is going to continue to struggle? They got Georgia this weekend. Georgia's mad. I hate to be them, but what does it mean as far as the narrative about the team? You're not going to get flowers and roses and accolades, but internally, that's the thing. Maybe this gets these guys going. Whatever got them going the other night, motivated them, needs to continue to happen. Uh, Keep cleaning up the mistakes, get an answer at center and really on your whole O line and roll. And there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Now, the stakes get higher. I mean, these next three defensive lines, folks, they're three of the best in the country. I mean, it's not. This is not Kentucky coming up. So what you want to do is for your offense is you want to get the confidence to go to work, to fix the mistakes, to go out there and believe that you can. Because a lot of football is mental, as we know, and then go shoot your shot, man. I mean, that's all there is to it. So, as far as the plan and all that goes, I don't know. I'll spend some time talking about it during the bye week and next week. But man, you go from bombs away at Missouri to having 14 passing attempts against Kentucky, who has a bad secondary. I don't know what to think, just to be honest. But we'll see. Mike Shula's. People ask me a lot, like the play calling. I'm like, well, some of it. So what drives me crazy a little bit is run, run, pass, run, run, pass, run, run, pass. That gets predictable. Um, that's an NFL thing to me. But that's just me. I mean, I shoot, one game they look this way, one game they look that. As far as plan of attack, I mean, I talked last week about spreading the field and going tempo, and they did some tempo. But it was more Lenore Sellers kind of, running around and getting rushing yardage and that kind of thing, which can be effective. I think they're going to need that in Baton Rouge. But it's a big question mark as far as what exactly this team's identity is. I don't know. And I don't think it necessarily needs an identity. The identity needs to be to put points on the board and move the football, and to help Lenore Sellers out because he's still a very, very good player and a difference maker. It could be a difference maker in these next three games. So there's some bye week bullet points for you. I'll be back tomorrow morning on coffee. Don't forget, Inside the Gamecocks, the show. It's Terrible Tuesday. So Phil and I will be talking about how terrible things are. It's also Taco Tuesday. That's the only non-terrible thing about Tuesday, the worst day of the week. No press conference today with the open date. Press conference will return tomorrow or next week and all that good stuff. Don't forget, no JC and Morgan this week. No coffee, no show Friday. Back to full speed on next Monday. But looking forward to chatting with you later as throughout the bye week. as we hit on some big picture things for this team. 3-2. Didn't expect it to be quite here. Thought 4-1 was probably the most realistic possibility. Certainly didn't see the Vandy loss coming. Scared me. Thought Carolina would have a dogfight on its hands, but did not expect them to lose. That one, I thought Missouri could clip them. I've been high on Missouri all year. But it is what it is. But, there's nothing that says Carolina, as I mentioned, can't go play a really good game and win and get this thing heading back in the right direction, like it usually happens with Shane Beamer. All right, reminder, Gamecock Graffiti, 803-250-1297, 803-250-1297. Name and hometown and leave us a message. We'll play it on the show. All right, this has been Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Hope you have a wonderful, terrible Tuesday. Holla at you.
JC and Mad Dog Mully on the Gamecock Show.